This is TK Coleman, and you're listening to Small Business Edge by Ceteris. This is the podcast where we deconstruct small business entrepreneurship through conversations with franchisees, passion-based business owners, and other experts. We learn what it takes to succeed. Today's guest is Joe Zentmyer. Joe Zentmyer is the co-founder and chief financial officer at First Ascent Climbing and Fitness. First Ascent is a locally grown, world-class group of climbing, yoga, and fitness centers in Chicago. And their mission is to serve and grow Chicago's vibrant climbing community. Joe, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I found it really interesting. I saw on your website that the entire founding team consists of Chicago climbers. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. I've been climbing for 8 years, and then one of my partners has been climbing for almost 30 years, and then my two other partners have been climbing for 10 plus years.
Now, here's what's fascinating to me. One of your co-founders said you have a neat video on your website. I would encourage anyone to check out. Just gives you a visual of the space, introduces you to a number of the members of the community. But one of the things your co-founder says is that you meet hundreds of people in Chicago who do rock climbing. And everyone who rock climbs in Chicago, they've been waiting for a gym like this for 20 years. Why has no one thought of this before? And what made your team, the crew, to finally get this right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people tried to open climbing gyms around Chicago over the last 10 years. And kind of the consistent barrier to entry was really real estate costs and finding a location that's appropriate for a climbing gym. Climbing gyms are unique buildings, unique spaces. You have to have 50-foot clear, tall ceilings. And there aren't a lot of buildings like that. And when those buildings are available, they're very expensive, especially in Chicago. So that has always been the challenge for climbing gyms. And my partners and I worked really hard. And really, before our first gym opened, we were working for 3+ years to get a location built and open. So that, I think, has been the barrier all along for all of the climbers around Chicago to build the gym.
You had an article in the Chicago Tribune where you told the story of how, I believe this was your first location, where you actually renovated an old Borders books?
That's our second location, actually. Yeah.
That's the second one. Okay. So, and there was a lot of serendipity to that story. Do you mind kind of walking us through how that happened?
Yeah, so our first location is First Ascent Avondale, which is in the Avondale neighborhood in Chicago. It's kind of it's on the west side of Chicago, and that was a ground-up build of a 25,000 square foot building, and that's what we worked on for 3+ years to get built. And it has a 60-foot clear, tall ceiling. And was a major real estate investment on the part of First Ascent as a business. As we were working on that location, we were approached by the owner of the Borders bookstore, former Borders bookstore, which had been vacant for a number of years, more than 5 years. And he said, I think, this gym could work for climbing. And, I still remember going in and saying, it would be tough to make it work as a climbing gym, but I think we can do it. And so while we were under construction on our first gym, we went back to our investors and said, hey, we think we got another location. We think we should do it. And that was kind of the birth of First Ascent Uptown, our second location. So Uptown actually opened about 3 months after our first location.
Oh, wow. Wow. And there was a situation where while you were trying, I believe this was the building owner, that there was the Billboard controversy where they wanted to have a billboard above the building that you were buying, and that
yeah,
on that. Yeah.
Yeah, so like the old Borders bookstore, obviously Borders went bankrupt. The owner of the building purchased it out of bankruptcy, and then he let it be vacant, I think, for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought it for such a low price out of bankruptcy that he was able to fund his costs by just having a billboard on the top of the building, which kind of speaks a lot to the visibility of the building and why we were excited about it for climbing gym use. And the reason why the billboard was put up was so that they could find a great tenant for that building that was really a good fit, because it's an iconic building in that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And it all kind of worked out to our benefit for First Ascent, because now we're in it and it's a great location. It's doing great. And it was a kind of a great adaptive use of a space that had been vacant for a number of years.
And so now you have a third location. Your first was in Avondale. The second one was in Uptown. Mm-hmm. And now you have a third location as well.
Yeah. So our third location is First Ascent Humboldt Park, which is it's kind of a similar type of location to Uptown. It's bouldering, fitness, and yoga. And actually, our grand opening party is next week. So we're really excited about it. It's been a lot of work to put it together, but it's going to be a fabulous gym.
All right, let's talk about the community aspect. That's something that you emphasize quite heavily. One of the things you say is that your number one priority is to serve the community. Mm-hmm. What does the nuts and bolts of that community experience look like, and how do you sustain it?
Yeah, I think there's two aspects to it. One is just internally within First Ascent. All of our investors in our business are local to Chicago. Most of them are rock climbers or parents of rock climbers. Mm-hmm. And then my partners and I are all like from Chicago, and we're climbers and have been longtime climbers in the Chicago community. So we get Chicago, and we get why climbing is important to Chicagoans. And I think that's kind of the first part of this is like, we came out of the Chicago climbing community. And then now that we've opened, and we've been open for a couple of years, we're building a whole new community of people that are trying climbing for the first time, never climbed, never even knew that the sport was available to them in Chicago. And those people come to it with a whole different vibe than what I knew of when I was climbing in Chicago 5 years ago. Now it's a much more accessible sport. It's easier to climb. The same things that excited me 5 years ago excite people now. Like being able to go outside, try climbing outside, improving as a climber, getting better, but also meeting others as you learn how to climb, and making great friendships through the sport. So that's kind of, I think, what's great about climbing is it's an inherently social sport. You're always kind of tying in with someone else on a rope, and you're working together to figure out how to get to the top of a route. And it's just a great way to meet people, and a great social sport.
And this isn't the kind of social sport where you have to first gather up a few friends. You can go to a place like First Ascent, and you can go by yourself and be a part of an existing community.
That's right. And for us as a business, what we are always trying to do is build events and build experiences that help people meet others. And climbing by itself does a great job of that. But then we're also doing, special events, bands, free food, member-only nights that help people meet others. Because we know that, the more that someone knows more people at our gym, the more likely they are to keep coming back and just have a great time.
One of the things I really like is that there seems to be a wide range of options for different personality types. You have a 60-foot space for the more advanced climber that's looking for the rigorous challenge. But then you have a lot of easier things for beginners. You have a summer kids camp, you have kids classes, you have private training, special workshops. So you can walk into this place and be a guy like me. I've never gone climbing in my life. I can walk in there and you'll show me what I need to do to get started, even if I'm really afraid, right?
That's right. I mean, I think there was kind of a phase a few years ago where sports were extreme, and that was kind of the buzzword. And climbing really doesn't fit into that. Actually, like, people don't get hurt at our gyms, and falling is a normal part of the sport. You fall onto a rope or you fall onto a pad that's 16 inches thick, and it's just it's a sport, and but it's also a social activity at the same time, which is why it's becoming so popular throughout the United States. But as you mentioned, we also offer yoga, and we have a great fitness area as well. And people love having like a place to go to do all of those activities together.
What's been the most surprising thing for you as a result of starting this business?
I think what has been kind of surprising to me is just been how much I've enjoyed it. Especially after the gym opened. Prior to First Ascent, I worked at a large multinational corporation doing a variety of business and finance roles. And I always thought I enjoyed my work there, and I think I did. But now that I work full time for First Ascent as CFO, I'm like, this is a great job,
Yeah.
And there's a lot of hassles and challenges, but I enjoy the challenges, and I just didn't realize how much more I could enjoy my job by being like founder of First Ascent. So I think that's been the most surprising thing to me.
Let's talk about that a little bit. I find in startup culture, in the entrepreneurial world, people are very familiar with titles, but people don't have a clear concept of what someone's workflow looks like. I'm very interested in what the average Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday looks like for you. And don't be afraid to bore me here. I want to know everything. I want to know, when do you get up? How many hours do you work? And what types of things do you do throughout the day?
Yeah. It's funny. I'm not a morning person, but I wake up at between 5:30 and 6 a.m. every day.
That sounds like a morning person to me.
I know, but I stay up late too. So it's kind of, I run out of sleep sometimes, but I wake up early. First thing I do is I kind of go through my emails. Anything that needs immediate response, I respond to. And then I kind of table everything else. I just go out for a run on the lake here in Chicago. It's a great trail to run on. And then I kind of come back. I get a quick breakfast. And then depending on the day of the week, I have like a really different schedule. My bookkeeping days, where like I kind of go through the books for First Ascent and I take care of all the administrative tasks, are on Tuesdays every week. So that day I usually work from home and I just kind of really focus in on the books. I usually end up doing that on Saturdays too. So Tuesdays, Saturdays kind of be our bookkeeping days. Wednesday, I meet with the team at First Ascent, with my partners, with our managers. For most of the day, I'm like meeting with people and kind of brainstorming and making decisions about a variety of items. And then Mondays are usually like my floating days, where I try to kind of catch up on things. There's usually a lot of running around, like driving around Chicago, visiting, marketing companies, visiting real estate sites. For the last 2 months,
you mentioned visiting
Thursdays.
Really quickly. You mentioned visiting real estate sites, like scouting out possible future locations.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And that is kind of slowing down a little bit because we're focusing in on the new locations that we're building. And to that end, like on Thursdays, that's pretty much my construction day. And I've been focused on our location in Humboldt Park. And I have like kind of 3 or 4 meetings about Humboldt Park, getting that location open and going through whatever open issues there are on construction. Friday is usually meetings, more meetings with staff. I do more like kind of one-on-ones with my partners and staff on Fridays. So that's my typical week. Not very typical, but that's what I do. Yeah.
I'm always interested in asking entrepreneurs the following. What does your weekend look like?
So I usually work at least a half day on the weekend. I usually do it Saturday, but actually a lot of times I'm kind of burned out by Saturday, so I do it on Sunday. So, but it's pretty typical for me that I work 4 or 5 hours over a weekend.
One of the hardest things about being a founder is that you have to impose your own limitations. You have to create your own boundaries. You have to set your own schedule. And you have to balance that with the fact that technically there's always something that needs to be done. You're never done. It doesn't matter if it's Labor Day or July 4th. You probably have something that needs to get done. How do you know when to stop working? How do you create boundaries in your life?
It's a great question. I think for me, part of it is I just accept that there's time periods where I'm going to be unbalanced and I'm going to work too much. I'm actually in one of those time periods right now because Humboldt Park is opening. But some other like little tricks that I do is, and I mentioned this earlier, is like my Tuesdays are my work from home days, and all I do is bookkeeping on those days. And part of the reason why that is I just discovered, like, if I tried to do, financial work in bits and pieces during other days, it was just really time consuming, and then I just did a bad job of it. And by doing like a once a week work from home day, that imparted some order on my life. And then the other thing I like, when before First Ascent Avondale had opened, before our first gym had opened, I was working so much because I was also still working full time in my real job in the corporate world, that like I just kind of gave up on personal fitness and said I'm just going to work all the time. And now I don't do that. Like I run every morning, and I climb 4 days a week. And I just basically I actively refuse to work during those times, because if I didn't refuse, I would just work.
I know you mentioned that at one point you kind of allowed your working out routine to slip to the back burner. Do you feel the difference when you are physically fit? Does it translate into your practical work?
Oh, for sure. I think, obviously I'm a healthier person. The other, like, I think thing that maybe not as obvious is just being more fit and having more energy is, I'm a much easier person to be around when I'm working out regularly. I'm not as grouchy. It just that the endorphins and the expending energy just it kind of balances out my personality, I think. And I'm just a nicer guy. Like, I'm not as grouchy, which makes me a better manager, And that's something like, particularly after I started exercising more, I realized like, oh, I was like so grouchy just because I hadn't like used my hands to do anything. Like, I was just so kind of locked into just working all the time that I just was out of balance. And now it's kind of affecting the way I interact with others. And I think that's kind of like just being healthy and fit is not only good for you, but probably good for your business too.
That's a really powerful insight. It can be so easy for the ambitious person to suppose that they just have to give, and be externally focused. But one of the most charitable, compassionate things you can do is take care of yourself. If not for you, for the people that have to work with you, right?
Right, that's right. And and for me, like, it really snuck up on me. Like, I didn't realize I was getting like grouchy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It sort of took starting to exercise again to realize, like, oh, I'm in a lot better mood all the time now.
Mm.
So,
One of the things I like to do, Joe, is I like to blow apart entrepreneurial stereotypes. And I work with a lot of young people who sometimes get the impression that people that are in positions of leadership have kind of reached this place where they no longer struggle with things. They've got all the answers. They figured it all out. So one thing I like to hear your take on
yeah.
is
Yeah.
what are you failing at? What's not coming together easily for you? And how are you dealing with that?
You know, so I think my biggest challenge all the time is my background is kind of finance, and I'm like really comfortable with the numbers. I'm really comfortable communicating about objective items, objective data, but you know, being softer and kind of connecting with people on a personal level is always my challenge, right? And figuring out how to kind of communicate effectively with a broad group. That's something I'm always working on, and it's really kind of critical for First Ascent that I communicate well across a broad spectrum of different types of employees. You know, like we have some employees that are in college. We have some that have just graduated out of college. We have some that have been climbing for 20 years, you know, and just finding out how to connect to them and motivate them is like probably my most consistent challenge and the thing that I'm always working on.
So. How do you work on something like that?
You know, I'm a big reader, so I read a lot of books. I've taken some classes, but I think, you know, for me, it's just putting myself in a situation where I have to do it, you know, and I think avoidance is kind of the worst thing you can do. And also just, you know, just being really honest with yourself and be like, you know, I could have explained that better. I could have been more sensitive about it. That's how I do it. It's just every day working towards your development goals, you know?
Makes total sense. Joe, you're a climber and you make your living running a climbing business. For many people, that's the ultimate dream, to find a way to make a living doing what they love. What parting advice would you offer to someone who wants to follow your path?
My parting advice would be, you know, realize that it takes a lot of grit to start any kind of a business, even if it's the business that's your passion. And grit means that, hey, you might have to work for a number of years before you make any money, but you have to have faith in yourself, faith in the process of starting a business, and just keep working, you know, just keep working. And if you work hard and you work well, like, good things will happen. And it just have to be really patient and be ready to work.
All right. If you're looking to hear or find out more information about First Ascent, you can go to the website at firstascentclimbing.com. You can learn all about the private trainings, the classes, the workshops, the events, and the various locations, as well as check out their blog, which regularly updates the interest and achievements of the various members of the community. Joe, thanks for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you.
Cheers. For added insights and a full collection of episodes from Small Business Edge, visit ceteris.com/podcast.